The room didn't smell like sorrow. It smelled like polished walnut, aged bourbon, and expectation. My father, Gideon, was already smoothing his suit jacket, inspecting his reflection in the high-gloss table. My mother, Celine, was scrolling on her phone beneath the table, her lips tight, eyes sharp. They weren't here to mourn. They were waiting for something transactional. Mr. Keaton, our family lawyer, didn't shuffle papers or clear his throat. He simply reached into his breast pocket and slid a single crisp $10 bill across the mahogany surface. It stopped just in front of me. No check, no stacks of zeros, just Alexander Hamilton staring back. For Elara, Keaton said, voice even, this is the sum of her inheritance. My brother, Dante, snorted first. Then my mother tried to cover a laugh, but it escaped anyway. My father shook his head, a look of condescending pity fixed across his face. They thought it was a joke. A cruel prank from the old man. I sat frozen, hands pressed into my lap, while the people who shared my blood laughed at my humiliation. Years of loyalty, of care, of being the one who actually visited Grandfather Elias at night, all reduced to a $10 bill. Before we continue, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? I want to see who's awake with me tonight. I didn't panic. Panic had been a structural flaw I'd reinforced against long ago. I didn't slam the table. I didn't cry or scream. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, trading my dreams and affection for their approval. But the market had crashed. I picked up the $10 bill. The room went silent, expecting a breakdown, a theatrics-laden display they could recount at dinners. I held it to the light, inspecting the watermark like a jeweler. Price of admission, I said softly. My mother's smile faltered. Excuse me? Celine whispered. Price of admission, I repeated, my voice calm, steady. To be free of you, it's a bargain. I folded the bill neatly, tucked it into my blazer pocket, and stood. I didn't look at Dante. I didn't look at my parents. I turned my back on the entire Gideon-Celine dynasty and moved toward the heavy oak doors. Elara, sit down, my father barked, voice dropping into that CEO register that had terrified employees for decades. Don't be dramatic, I said, keeping my pace. My hand touched the brass handle when Mr. Keaton's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate. Actually, he said, rising, Miss Elara, please remain. The rest of you are dismissed. The air thickened as my parents sputtered, confused. Dante laughed, looking at me with disbelief. Keaton, come on, he said. We haven't even reviewed the assets, the insurance, the investment accounts. Cut the drama. No other assets, Keaton said, eyes on me. The reading is concluded. You're dismissed. Gideon and Celine's faces went pale, the first real emotion I had seen in years. They threatened, pleaded, glared, but eventually, their pride and fear of humiliation won. They left. The heavy doors clicked. Silence replaced the stench of their greed. I sank into the nearest chair. Mr. Keaton, what just happened? I asked. He walked to the wall behind his desk, pressed a panel I hadn't noticed. A biometric safe hummed open. Your grandfather, he was meticulous, he said, pulling out a thick leather-bound journal. He called it the invisible ledger. I traced the cover. Cedar and dust. Familiar smells from the study where I hid as a child while my father entertained clients downstairs. That $10, Keaton said gently, wasn't an insult. It was a test. If you had thrown it back, cried, or begged, the meeting would have ended there. But if you accepted it calmly, without losing yourself, you were to inherit this. Inside was not a legal document. It was a ledger of life. Every hospital visit, every night I stayed by Grandfather Elias's side while they vacationed abroad, every small act of care meticulously recorded. October 3, 2020, Elara stayed until 11 p.m., read reports aloud. Section 2, Gideon and Celine called twice, concerned about their investment portfolio. December 18, 2021, Dante brought gifts, asked repeatedly about taxes. Section 2, Elara prepared meals, stayed by the fire, discussed old projects for hours. I ran my finger over the entries, heart tight, not with sadness, but with recognition. He saw me. He had always seen me. Keaton explained, your grandfather believed care is the only currency that appreciates. Your family assumed title and blood gave them the right to inherit, but they made no deposits in this account in 20 years. I flipped through hundreds of pages, noting the penmanship grew shakier near the end, yet deliberate. The ledger didn't lie. Finally, a bank statement. Grandfather Elias had quietly moved the family's personal holdings, insurance policies, bonds, accounts, into a blind trust. Your family thought wealth meant power, Keaton said. He chose to invest in the one person who actually helped him live. I stared at the numbers. Not just wealth. Validation. Quantified proof that I had not been invisible. Are you ready to see your real inheritance? Keaton asked. I nodded, tense. The ironworks, no, not the building itself. The insurance policies, the trusts, the accounts, all names and ownerships legally tied to me, the one who had cared. While my parents schemed, they had been quietly divested from everything. I ran my fingers over the edges of the journal, over the numbers that now meant freedom. For the first time, the room didn't feel suffocating. It felt like leverage, power, a weapon I didn't have to lift a hammer to use. I arrived at the old warehouse, the building Grandfather Elias had purchased decades ago, now in a state of deliberate neglect. Rusted beams, cracked concrete, broken skylights, it was a skeleton of memory, but to me, it was sacred. Dante was already there, leaning against a silver Range Rover, his expensive watch glinting under the winter sun. 3 movers, hired through shell accounts, were ready to remove files and assets. You're trespassing, I said, brushing dust off my jacket. This building is still under lease in my name. Dante didn't look up. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking an article Celine had just published. Lease? Oh, right, the little one you were obsessed with. Cute. Cute? I repeated, my voice rising. This is legally mine until December 31st. And every document, every insurance policy linked to this estate, you have no authority over it. He finally pocketed his phone and smiled. That predator smile, the one that said he thought the cage door was unlocked. The city council condemned it this morning. Public safety hazard. Vance Holdings acquired the rights at 9:15. You know how these things work, he said, gesturing toward the rusted machines behind him. I filed preservation papers months ago, I said, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the anger I had held in for years. You spent thousands on filings, Dante sneered. And all for what? A building your parents didn't care about while they spent the holidays skiing in Switzerland? Your inheritance, your so-called $10 prize, is a joke. The real assets? Gone. All gone. I touched the leather journal hidden in my bag. Grandfather Elias had thought of everything. I wasn't defenseless. They're tearing down everything, I muttered, adrenaline surging. You're erasing years of work. We need a legal injunction, now. Dante laughed. You think Mr. Keaton didn't anticipate this? You think the law can stop me? You're a child playing at power. I inhaled deeply. Legal battles wouldn't stop him. He had leveraged the city council, falsified reports, and moved through shell corporations faster than any court could respond. But I had the ledger. I had the blind trust. And I had the proof that every account, every insurance policy, every financial instrument, was in my name, not theirs. Dante, listen, I said, showing him the edge of the journal. Every insurance account you tried to claim? Every corporate card, every asset you thought you could transfer without my consent, your signatures are forged. They're all invalid. You're trespassing on my inheritance. He laughed again, but it was strained. You? A paper trail? That's cute too. I pulled out my phone and synced it to the warehouse's security monitors, ones Dante had never noticed. On the screens were timestamps, photos, documents, contracts, and the journal entries digitally logged with notarized timestamps. Everything linked to me. Every fraudulent move Dante and my parents had made was exposed in real time. You forgot one thing, I said, voice steady. Grandfather Elias ensured that all financial assets tied to this building, all policies, all trust accounts, require my direct approval for transfer. You just overstepped. Criminally. By trying to remove files, you've activated the contingency clauses. Dante froze, the color draining from his face. I could see him calculating. The Range Rover felt heavier now, a symbol of arrogance teetering on the edge of collapse. Contingency clauses? He asked, trying to mask panic. Yes, I said, pulling out a stack of notarized documents. Every identity-linked account, every policy, every shell company he used to protect me, it all names me. Your attempts to move assets without my authorization are fraud. And now, all transactions are frozen pending audit. That's the first strike. He stepped closer, venom in his voice. You can't stop me. You're just one person. I smiled, calm now, calculating. One person was enough. I had planned for years. I opened the journal to a marked page. It listed every time Dante and my parents had tried to exploit me, using my name for credit applications, insurance enrollments, and business accounts. Every move carefully catalogued. I had timestamps, signed documents, and photographic proof of my approvals versus their forgeries. I'm not one person, I said softly. I'm the owner of every account you thought you could steal. And if you move a single asset, I'll notify regulators, freeze all operations, and revoke your access permanently. You've played the wrong game. The ground trembled slightly as the movers started rolling carts with files and machines. I didn't flinch. I activated my final card, the identity-based control over the insurance accounts. Every vehicle, every contract linked to me required my electronic approval. Without it, the machines could not leave the property. The funds could not transfer. Dante realized too late, the power he assumed was his was now mine. You're bluffing, he said, panic creeping in. I shook my head, watching the monitors. Alerts flashed across the screen, transactions declined, access denied, accounts locked. He had literally no way to move $1 or claim a policy. He was trapped. You thought the $10 was an insult, I said, holding it up for effect. You laughed at me. But that bill was the key. It was your entry fee into a game you didn't understand. And now, you're losing everything while I'm standing here untouched. Clean. Legal. Untouchable. Dante's hand shook slightly, and I could see the realization hit him. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transaction, every stolen asset was documented and frozen. I didn't need a lawsuit. I didn't need a fight. I only needed the rules Grandfather Elias had set. I smiled, a calm but deadly smile, and said, You thought power was about money. Grandfather Elias taught me it's about foresight, integrity, and patience. You can have all the machines, the vehicles, the empty buildings, but you can't touch what's legally mine. Dante glared, defeated but still calculating. This isn't over, he said, voice low. It is, I replied. If you step another foot without authorization, regulators will be involved, insurance frozen, and all assets will be legally reclaimed. Your leverage is gone. Completely. The movers froze. Dante's crew looked at me, unsure whom to obey. I had tipped the balance. I had turned the tools of their power, the machines, the contracts, the policies, into instruments of control under my name. And just like that, the once intimidating warehouse, the skeleton of past family power, became my domain. I touched the journal. Every page was a testament to patience, observation, and silent strength. Every act of care I had given had been recorded. Every betrayal was documented. And now, every asset and every legal instrument tied to my identity was mine, untouchable and unassailable. Dante took a step back. For the first time in years, he realized he had underestimated me. Not just as a sibling, but as someone who had survived, who had documented everything, and who had turned their greed into a weapon. I walked through the warehouse, dust curling under my boots. The sunlight filtered through broken skylights, illuminating every corner where I had spent hours caring for the legacy my parents never understood. Every document, every account, every machine, every beam, it was now under my control. And for the first time, the weight of betrayal didn't crush me. It empowered me. By the time I returned to the office, the warehouse had quieted. Dante and my parents were gone, the movers frozen in indecision, waiting for instructions. I held the journal close, tracing the worn leather cover. Every entry, every timestamp, every carefully recorded act of loyalty, proof that I had been seen, that I had mattered. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Keaton. "The warehouse," I said. "The insurance policies, the accounts, freeze everything. Freeze the machines. Freeze the transfers. They tried to steal my inheritance again. I want it locked legally. Now." Keaton's calm voice responded, "Already done. Every attempt to move assets without your approval has been blocked. They can't touch a cent." I exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave my shoulders. All these years, I had believed my family's approval was the only currency that mattered. But they had spent decades investing in appearances, in ego, in power, while I had quietly invested in care, attention, and loyalty. And now that currency, the only one that truly appreciates, was mine. When Dante called, his voice was sharp but brittle. "Elara, this isn't fair. You can't just lock us out. We built this empire." I smiled. "No," I said calmly. "You built an illusion. And illusions crumble when the person who understands the foundation takes control. Everything you thought was yours has a signature, a timestamp, or a policy tied to me. Legally, ethically, you've already lost." For a brief moment, I saw something human in Dante. Fear. Shame. The kind of recognition my parents never gave me. I didn't gloat. I let them realize their own failure. I took the journal out to the sunlight, flipping to pages I had marked. Every hospital visit, every night I stayed while my parents were on vacation, every small gesture of care, meticulously logged. I realized then that my grandfather had given me more than money. He had given me insight, strategy, and power, and the knowledge that love, care, and loyalty were more valuable than ego and wealth. I walked through the warehouse, inhaling the dusty, earthy scent of the space. It was no longer just a building. It was a fortress built not of steel or concrete, but of proof of my worth and of the futility of their greed. When Celine and Gideon returned, they were met with a formal notice via certified email, all transfers frozen, all accounts locked, all assets legally reclaimed in my name. They arrived, expecting to intimidate me, to claim the warehouse or my inheritance. Instead, they were met with silence, a wall of law and careful strategy they could not penetrate. "You can't do this," Celine cried, voice trembling. "We're your parents. You can't lock us out." "You chose your path," I replied softly. "You spent your lives prioritizing power over people, transactions over care. I simply followed the rules my grandfather set. And by every standard, legal, ethical, moral, you've forfeited your claim. Gideon stepped forward, anger in his eyes. We can fight this. We'll sue. This isn't over. I nodded. It isn't over. But it's over for you. Every fraudulent move you made has been documented. Every forged signature, every attempt to exploit my identity has been recorded and nullified. You can't win here. Not in law. Not in legacy. Not in principle. Their silence was absolute. No threats, no shouting, no desperate schemes. They had underestimated me, and it had cost them everything. I returned to my desk, the sunlight streaming in through restored skylights. I opened the leather journal, flipping to a clean page. March 12th, project launched. All systems secure. The foundation holds. I smiled. My parents had spent decades trying to leave a mark on the world with towers, with acquisitions, with influence. They had believed that height and wealth were proof of greatness. They had forgotten that the most enduring structures are built quietly, with care, patience, and integrity. The $10 bill that had been a symbol of humiliation now rested on my drafting table. I didn't need it. It wasn't proof of my inheritance anymore. It was proof of a lesson. I glanced at the journal again. Every page a testament to patience. Every act of loyalty recorded. Every betrayal catalogued. And in the end, it was my careful attention, my quiet diligence, that had built the real foundation for success, not ego, not appearances, not wealth accumulated through manipulation. The moral hit me in a clarity that made the air feel lighter. Legacy is not inherited, it is earned. True power is not in possession, but in proof. And the care you give, without expectation, without calculation, is the currency that never devalues. I looked out over the city from the warehouse rooftop. Sunlight reflected off the glass towers in the distance, structures my parents had built for recognition. And I realized that I had something stronger, the foundation that could not be bought, stolen, or undermined. If you're building something in your life, whether it's relationships, character, or trust, remember this: wealth can be taken, titles can be forged, recognition can be manipulated. But the legacy of integrity, care, and foresight? That belongs to you alone. I reached for the journal one last time, tracing the edges, smelling the cedar and dust, feeling the weight of every careful decision and every act of love. And I knew this: the most important structures you will ever build are not made of steel, concrete, or currency, they are made of choices. My parents had tried to bury me under a $10 bill. They had underestimated me. But like seeds sown in secret soil, I had grown. And finally, I was free.